Suddenly, Isabella arrived, unexpected and, as usual, fashionably late. The moment she laid eyes on Jared, she paused. He had changed. There was something different, more refined, sharper. Everyone looks for shortcuts, she mused internally. And Jared had clearly found one. There was a method circulating among magicians, an unstable trick involving a bug in the training system that could increase a mage's mana by 2 or 3 points in a single day. Most who used it became over-reliant and lacked real combat skill. But Jared had done something else entirely. He had taken that method, stabilized it, merged it with traditional training, and shaped it with his personal mana control. The result? A powerful hybrid technique that boosted his magical strength by 6 full points. This technique needed a name, something symbolic. Solo bug player? Jared called it, a title reflecting his solo path in a world that didn't quite feel like his own. Isabella studied him carefully. Jared didn't operate by the usual rules. She asked him if he could perceive mana flows, currents of magic that normal people couldn't even sense. Jared hesitated, then shrugged it off, his mana level already proving he wasn't ordinary. But Isabella wasn't satisfied. She stepped closer, gently touching his shoulder. "You're not from this world, are you?" she asked quietly. Startled, Jared turned toward her, quickly denying it. But Isabella pressed further. Perhaps he was from the Eastern Empire, she speculated, a place whispered about in legends, said to be home to people with extraordinary absorption abilities. Jared deflected with a chuckle. "Old myths," he said. But in truth, the Eastern Empire was more than myth to him. It was a region in paradise, the online game he had played obsessively. A game whose expansion he'd waited 5 years to experience, before dying and ending up here. Isabella noticed the change in his expression. "Strange things happen around you," she said, gently touching his arm again. "Let's speak honestly, you're the only one who can see and hear me." Jared sighed. "I'm not giving you the spiritual eye." "Fine," she replied with a teasing smile. "Then save it as a wedding gift." That caught him off guard. She laughed, then confessed. "I used to find you disgusting when you were fat. But now, you're surprisingly handsome." Jared flushed red, especially when she admitted she had been watching him sleep, from the ceiling, no less. She hovered beside him, whispering with a playful grin, "And don't forget, you gave me your first kiss in years." Mortified, Jared jumped up and bolted from the room, claiming he had urgent business in Ranella. Isabella, of course, insisted on coming along. During the carriage ride, Jared observed young Lena with growing admiration. She picked up sword mastery faster than most adult swordmen. At this rate, she'd outgrow his lessons in a month or 2. He needed to find her a proper mentor, and fast. As they rolled along, Hayes, seated beside him, handed over a letter from Arknaz addressed to the Lord. Jared read it. The letter said that Siravia's most talented warrior had only 1 month left until it moved to another place. It was time to act. Jared had a short list of trustworthy candidates in mind. But just then, the carriage window shattered. Jared sprang into action, conjuring a magic shield to protect Hayes. The first wave of arrows was weak and easy to deflect. But soon, the attack intensified, the shield began to crack. Hayes moved to shield him with her body, but Jared stopped her cold. "If you step outside, you'll die. Sit down." "I mean it." His voice carried a terrifying finality. Hayes sat back, wide-eyed. Isabella appeared, offering to help. Jared refused. "This is my fight." The attackers, realizing a mage was aboard, regrouped. Their leader, a hired assassin named Tog, stepped forward. Confident, he aimed to impress a newcomer in their ranks by finishing the job himself. As Tog drew closer, he raised his hand, ready to unleash a devastating spell. Jared wasn't intimidated. With the calm focus of a lord, he launched a burst of speed magic to confuse the assassin. But Tog only laughed. "Tricks," he sneered, summoning a crackling magic arrow. Jared conjured another shield, but the pressure kept growing. Tog was a mage killer, trained to counter spellcasters. Tog's eyes locked onto Jared's staff. With bloodlust and lunged forward. Jared was ready. He caught the attack, reversed the momentum, and struck with a spell that magnified his physical strength. Tog staggered, surprised at the sudden force. Then Jared uttered one word, paralysis. Tog froze, every muscle locked. He couldn't move. Now at his mercy, the assassin stared up at Jared in desperation. Jared didn't expect much. Criminals like Tog rarely talked. But this time was different. "Spare me," Tog gasped. "I'll tell you everything, anything you want." Jared stepped forward, staff in one hand, a large hammer in the other. He listened, but he didn't trust. Criminals always spoke sweetly when their lives were on the line. Without hesitation, Jared raised the hammer high and lunged forward, and brought it crashing down. Not far away, a young boy sat in a hidden cave near the bandits' lair. He listened to the clash outside, trembling. He remembered the old saying, "A traitor without gold can't buy luck." And luck had not favored him lately. He had overheard it all, how Tog and his gang had murdered 11 people in just the last 6 days. He wondered why no one had stopped them before. But maybe someone could. From his hiding place, the boy watched as Jared rose into the sky and created a massive fire sphere. Tog was still frozen in place. The boy smiled for the first time in days. Jared had given him hope. Maybe this warrior would save him too. And Jared did. The boy clung to him tightly after being rescued, thanking him again and again. Jared, embarrassed, tried to pull away, but the boy wouldn't let go. The boy introduced himself as someone who had come here to make a deal for mana crystals but had been captured. Jared apologized for the lawlessness in the region. Jared suddenly recalled something from his past life, Arknaz, the most powerful NPC ruler from the East. He had built an empire using fashion foresight and market analysis, mastering trends. Jared was shocked to learn that this was that boy. He decided to help him further. Offering him 15% of the profits, Jared asked the boy to handle the medicine sales in Ranella. But Arknaz declined the offer. Instead, he made 2 requests. The first, simple, he asked Jared to call him Arknaz. Isabella, listening nearby, was speechless. Arknaz had turned down profit, just to be called by that name? Still, Jared agreed. They soon arrived in Ranella, and it was nothing like they had heard. The kingdom was full of life and trade, despite its struggles. Together, they began setting up their shop. Arknaz and Hayes carried boxes, filled with flyers and packaging. Jared prepared a barrel containing the precious medicine, but it wasn't quite finished. Turning a faucet, he filled a vial with a red liquid. With a click, it sealed shut, and a system message confirmed that his herb harnessing skill had reached level 2. Jared gave Arknaz a sample bottle to sell. Soon, their first customer approached. The man, Talon, had Ranella's disease. Arknaz smiled and told him the medicine was just 1 gold piece. Suspicious, Talon hesitated, but Arknaz's charm and Jared's confidence swayed him. Talon signed a contract, confused that it gave him full rights to the medicine. He drank it anyway. Jared assured him it would take 30 minutes to work, and promised to refund 1,000 gold if it failed. But before he could go away, Jared said that the medicinal effect of the medicine will take 30 minutes. He could go away now and rest. Tolan replied that he did buy the medicine since he trusts Arknaz, but if these medicine turn up to be a fraud. But before he could finish speaking, Jared replied that he will refund it for 1,000 gold and he will cut his wrist too. Convinced by Jared, the man prepared to go home. 2 hours passed. Jared wondered where Arknaz had gone. Then, a roar echoed in the distance. A massive crowd was charging toward them, with Arknaz at the front, leading them like a whirlwind. Hayes gasped. Could they really all be coming here? Yes. The crowd surged toward their stall, desperate for the cure. Hayes stepped protectively in front of Jared, but there was no stopping them. Everyone wanted to be first. The island was surrounded. The cure for Ranella's disease had become the most sought-after item in Ranella, and Jared's quiet shop had become the center of the kingdom's hope. It was absolute chaos, uncontrollable, yet thrilling. People buzzed with excitement, praising the miracle remedy. Siravia's status was rising quickly, gaining respect throughout the region. But, as always, with praise came criticism. Whispers of Siravia's dark past resurfaced, its grim reputation, its failed leadership. Some even called the king a fat pig, who had only recently decided to use his brain and enact change. That's when Arknaz stepped in. He took control, raised his voice above the noise, and announced, "This medicine will only be sold here, only today. If you want more, come to Sirivia yourselves." He added that the nightmare forest of Sirivia was still largely untouched by hunters and full of monsters, an irresistible lure for adventurers. He also mentioned that in the kingdom of Sumitra, such a remedy would be rare and cost twice as much. By doing this, Arknaz spurred even more interest. He made sure people formed lines and didn't push. "There's enough for everyone," he declared. By nightfall, the final jar was gone, and the crowd dispersed, satisfied. Exhausted, Hayes fell asleep like a log. Jared sat beneath the stars, overjoyed to count their earnings. 12,250 gold pieces. The equivalent of 12.2 billion in his past life's currency. It was enough to live in comfort for years. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Is the Lord pleased with the income? Jared turned to see Arknes, who didn't look the least bit tired. He approached, holding a single coin in his hand. I've come for my second reward, he said, referencing the deal they'd made. Jared hadn't mentioned the 2 wishes yet, but now he smiled. Very well, he said. What do you want? Arknes took a deep breath. I want to be your servant, and lead the Merchants' Union of Sarivia. Then he dropped to one knee, head bowed. Though only 20, Arknes promised to do his best to turn the Union into the strongest on the continent, if Jared would trust him. Jared admired Arknes's boldness. Despite being robbed by bandits and left with nothing, he hadn't given up. He smiled, saying, I already considered you my vassal the first time I saw your potential. But the Merchants' Union, our trade hub, won't be handed out so easily. Arknes looked a little worried, though he'd expected that answer. Jared reassured him, but you've earned your chance. Show me what you can do. Insight, drive, courage, Arknes had it all. Most importantly, he had luck. The position happened to be vacant. Jared liked Arknes. He could see the future of trade shining brightly under his leadership. Overcome with gratitude, Arknes thanked him deeply. Jared, now sleepy, excused himself and promised they'd return to Sarivia tomorrow. Truthfully, Jared was glad to be going back to the cold lands of his kingdom. As he walked under the starlit sky, a warm spring breeze brushed his face. Thanks to a bug in the herb mixing system, his crafting skill had reached level 35. With it came a new reward, knowledge of automated potion production. By investing 5,000 gold and 10 curvature crystals, he could produce 24 vials of medium concentration potion per day. At 39 gold each, that meant a 900 gold daily profit. Since the potions could only be bought in Sarivia, monster hunters had more reason than ever to venture into the Nightmare Forest. As they hunted and monsters dwindled, the number of valuable crystals would rise. Traders from other kingdoms began arriving, eager to profit from Saravia's new riches. Good things kept happening. Even Jared didn't expect the rapid success. The potions became the spark that ignited Saravia's recognition across the mainland. One day, Jared journeyed alone to a desolate, frozen place, completely empty of life. Isabella, ever watchful, followed him. She feared he'd come to end his life. After all, they weren't married yet. He looked healthier than ever, so he couldn't possibly be a ghost. But that wasn't his reason. He was hunting a monster, Duca, a powerful lich. When he told her this, Isabella panicked. Don't say things like that, she scolded. That monster will steal your soul. But Jared stayed calm. He knew Duca's tactics, his habits, everything. In Paradise, the game turned reality. Duca had once been released during the Great Sona War by the Demon King himself, gaining immortality. In the game, players had to confront him in the special campaign, Wrath of Duca. Once Duca became stronger, no sword or spell could harm him. Only divine power could end him. Isabella realized she couldn't stop Jared. He knew too much. Could he be a god in disguise? She voiced her suspicions. Stop with the nonsense, he snapped. You're driving me crazy. Eventually, he reached the Lich's lair. Remembering the in-game map, he searched for a hidden crevice. Isabella floated nearby, amused. He looked like a dog searching for a bone. He finally found the passage, through a wall. Isabella gasped. The secret doorway was one of the game's bugs, and it had worked in real life. It triggered a hidden map location, allowing him to approach Duca. They entered a chamber full of gold, jewels, and weapons, a treasure trove meant for an entire raid team. Among them were over 10 powerful artifacts. Jared approached a shelf and found what he was looking for, a ring that had belonged to a greedy man named Melt. As he slid it onto his finger, coins poured from the nearby jewelry like a flood. It was a spatial ring, one with seemingly unlimited storage. Isabella warned him not to anger Duca by stealing from him. I'm not stealing, Jared said. These were taken from Duca's victims. I'm returning the favor. They reached the Lich's inner sanctum. There sat Duca, chained to his throne. Once, a woman had drained his vital energy, binding him in place. He hadn't risen since. Now, he dreamed only of freedom and revenge. Jared approached. He could hear Duca's tormented muttering, vile thoughts brewing in the Lich's undead mind. You should reflect on your past, Jared said coldly. Then, without giving him a chance to react, he placed a hand on Duca's head. The Lich couldn't look him in the eyes. In that moment, Jared invoked holy fire, a flame capable of burning the undead to ashes in seconds. Jared wanted to be more than a ruler. He wanted to be the only true hero in this world. The one who would stand against the evil raging across the universe. The flames he unleashed revealed the Lich Duca's true form. A withered skeleton, wrapped in a smoldering black cloak that clung to his burning bones. The fire consumed him, but it did not extinguish. Through the crackling fire, Duca's voice crept out, low and rasping. "How did you bypass all my traps?" But there was no time to answer. The throne beneath Duca burned, the flames licking higher, and Jared quickly leapt back. Before him stood not just a monster, but a cursed magician, one who had sacrificed his humanity for power. A being who had long violated the laws of the world, and who knew no pity. Such magicians could create magical avatars, puppets of thought and dark energy that could act far from their true bodies. Duca had lost his core life essence to a sacred maiden, who had imprisoned his soul within his decaying corpse. If Jared killed him now, there would be no resurrection. He had to be careful. Duca's magic could drain the life force of anyone who came too close. Jared had faced him before, in the game Paradise. Now, it wasn't a game. It was real. This time, there were no second chances. From a safe distance, Jared summoned lightning arrows, flinging them toward Duca. In his prime, the Lich would have dodged them easily. But now he was weakened, nearly depleted. And Jared was no ordinary opponent. Duca suddenly tensed. He sensed something divine in Jared. Then he saw it. The ring of the Holy Maiden, once thought lost. It radiated divine fire. And Duca knew, if he wanted to live, he had to act fast. Despite his weakened state, Duca summoned the Knights of the Dark Dungeon. They rose from the ground, grinding bones and rusted armor, answering the Lich's silent call. "Block his path," Duca ordered. Isabella, panicked, appeared beside Jared. "There are too many evil spirits here," she warned. But Jared remembered the game mechanics. These knights had always appeared in areas with traps. Something was different now. He needed to stop Duca from casting high-level spells. He came up with a plan. "I'll take the guards," Isabella said suddenly. With a flash, she dove into the skull of one of the undead knights. Its eerie gaze swept across the others, who paused, unsure. She controlled him from the inside. The knight's appearance was monstrous, but his body was strong, enough to disrupt the others. Duca noticed the disturbance and lashed out, hurling Isabella away. The knight's bones shattered, but she was unharmed. It was all Jared needed. With Duca distracted, Jared attacked, this time using the connected lightning. He charged the blade with explosive power, aiming to end it with a final blow. He reached for a nearby magic staff, overflowing with energy. But Duca had regained focus. He conjured a massive shield, encasing himself in a wall of force. Unfortunately for him, Jared's specialty was dual-casting magic, a rare and deadly skill. He unleashed two simultaneous attacks, overwhelming the Lich's defenses. In Paradise, Duca had always fallen to chain lightning. Jared infused his strike with the same spell. The magic bound Duca in chains, pinning him to his throne. Jared paused to catch his breath. Isabella, still inside the bones of the fallen knight, stared in awe at the scene. She knew without her, Jared might not have made it this far. Suddenly, Duca lurched violently. He screamed, flailing against his restraints. Without hesitation, Jared smashed his head, knocking him back down. Then he activated a divine ability Isabella had gifted him, one meant to exhaust, not kill. As Duca thrashed, Jared moved in and struck him with a supercharged punch. Duca shrieked. This was what death felt like. For the first time in centuries, the Lich felt fear. True fear. And he hated it, but he couldn't escape. The chains held him. Still, Duca refused to surrender. Roaring in rage, he summoned a terrifying new form, a storm of raw magical power. "Face me again, coward," he bellowed. Jared rushed forward, summoning a defensive shield, but Duca's blast shattered it. The dark magic surged, nothing like ordinary spells. Jared stood exposed. Isabella, acting quickly, controlled the knight once more and blocked the fatal blow. Duca screamed in fury. He banished the knight with a single spell. The bones flew apart. Now Isabella could no longer help. But Jared remained unfazed. He was confident. He had studied this boss for years. Duca's strategies, weaknesses, and patterns were all etched into his memory. Jared moved fast, dodging every attack. The Lich was chained, heavy, and slow. He tried to crush Jared with his own body, but missed, again. Jared stopped for a moment. He trusted his intuition, his knowledge. Duca, however, mistook it for hesitation. Why was he only dodging? That's when Jared struck. He leapt forward and, holding the stolen magic staff, used fourth-class magic. He stabbed it into Duka's chest. Only then did Duka realize the truth. Jared had used low-level spells on purpose, to lull him into underestimating the threat. Confidence was Jared's greatest weapon. It was time for the final move. He activated the chain of the Holy Seal, wrapping Duka in divine energy. The Lich was completely bound. Jared placed a hand on his chest, channeling the full power of the divine flame. Duka struggled violently. Noise erupted from the walls as the lair itself began to collapse. Isabella hid behind Jared. "Give up," Jared said. "The demon king you wait for, he will never come." Duka's magic weakened. His body slumped. He could no longer resist. But as he sank into the earth, pulled by unseen forces into his eternal prison, he hissed one final question. "Are you sure you can handle what comes next?" Jared looked down, unwavering. "I'm only at fourth-class magic," he said calmly. "There's still a long road ahead." And with that, the once feared Lich Duka was sealed away, forever. Jared stood silently as the flames of the defeated Lich Duka died out. The reason he had come here was simple: to defeat the most powerful monarch on the mainland. Duka had laughed at the idea, brushing it off as a child's game. Yet Jared's ambition burned brighter than any flame. He didn't just want victory. He wanted what no other knight, not even the great ones blessed by the deities, could achieve. Not even the Demon King had managed it. Jared wanted everything. Duka, as he faded into death, found himself intrigued. This young mage, with such fierce confidence and unshakable will, was he brilliant or reckless? The Lich resolved to watch him from hell itself, to see if Jared's ambition would become his undoing. Isabella, who had seen it all, shivered. There were moments when Jared frightened even her. His instinct for self-preservation seemed completely shut off, like he was ready to sacrifice everything. Many in this world were stronger than him, but Jared didn't care. It was as if he knew he'd eventually rise above them all. Once the ashes settled and the dungeon quieted, Jared approached a pedestal at the center of the chamber. He picked up the object he had come for, a large bracelet, an artifact of growth. It pulsed with potential, but then Isabella saw something else, something strange. A book, half buried beneath fallen debris. "Jared, look at this," she said cautiously. The king of Sarivia walked over and picked it up. The leather binding was ancient, unfamiliar. He had never touched anything like this in all his studies of dark magic. As he flipped through its pages, a chill crept down his spine. It was a spellbook of resurrection. But this wasn't normal resurrection. The creature brought back wouldn't be free. It would become entirely subservient to the one who raised it, without resistance. Worse still, anyone who dared to break that bond would not simply die. They would be erased from existence, with no chance of return. Isabella read a few pages and recoiled in disgust. "This isn't a gift," she said. "It's slavery." Jared said nothing. "You wouldn't use this on me, would you?" she asked, half joking, half afraid. But Jared turned to her with a strange seriousness. "Tie me up," he said. "Use a curse." She blinked. "What?" He repeated it. "Use a curse. Bind me. I'll endure it." Isabella was stunned. For the first time, she looked at Jared and saw a flaw, a bit of madness, perhaps. But something in her twisted heart liked it. The boy added, "With each use, resistance increases. Eventually, I'll be immune to dark influence. It's better if we start now. I'd hire a proper sorcerer, but you'll do it for free." "You're insane," she muttered, shaking her head. "But, fine." Isabella paused, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "Is that all you have to say to me?" "I'll think about the rest," Jared replied quietly. She sighed. "I'm tired of being a ghost anyway." Jared wasted no time. He had already found the body. As Isabella prepared herself, she hadn't expected things to move this fast. Moments later, she was reborn, alive, in a new body. At first, Jared regretted it. Carrying her around in this fragile new form was exhausting. She was clumsy, unsteady, and constantly complaining. And she insisted on being called Isabel now. Though her appearance had changed slightly, her personality remained the same, stubborn, sharp, and hot-tempered. She claimed she had forgotten her past life, but clearly, the attitude hadn't gone anywhere. "Walk faster," Isabel barked. "It's freezing." "You're the one who wanted a body," Jared muttered. "If you wore these clothes in this weather, you'd complain too," she snapped. "You're just as twisted as Duka." Despite everything, Jared found her oddly endearing. Her presence hadn't dulled. If anything, she'd become more emotional, more expressive. But she still knew how to distract him. Then, she noticed something else. There are corpses everywhere, she said, wrinkling her nose. Don't worry, Jared reassured her. This is one of the trap zones I disarmed back when you were still a demon. Eventually, they reached the corpse Jared had selected for the resurrection. Isabel looked at it with a strange expression. Do you know how she died? Jared shook his head. No idea. She smiled faintly. Good, I'm glad you don't. She didn't want to know. She just hoped the girl hadn't turned into an evil spirit, because being one was torture. You felt nothing but cold and loneliness. No hunger, no warmth, just the void. As they made their way through the narrow stone passages, Isabel daydreamed. Maybe this girl would have been happy to let me live for her. I'll eat all kinds of delicious food. Dress beautifully. Go on adventures. She looked at Jared with a mischievous grin. And I guess I'm stuck with you. You're never boring, that's for sure, even if you are dangerous. Then she leaned against his back. For the first time in a long while, she felt content. Jared smiled to himself. He didn't say it aloud, but the feeling was mutual. He was glad to have a real partner at last. Across the continent, the number of active monster hunters had dropped drastically. The reason? The only cure for Ranella's disease, a terrifying affliction among adventurers, was found only in the kingdom of Cerevia. As a result, hunters were flocking there in droves. This exodus outraged Lord Horgus, ruler of a neighboring land. He was furious that his own kingdom was being drained of warriors, especially by a rival state. In response, he allocated a large sum of money to hire specialists and alchemists to reverse engineer the cure. But Cerevia was meticulous, paranoid, even about protecting the secret. They only managed to smuggle a single sample of the medicine. It wasn't nearly enough. The Lord of Ranella fury grew. He couldn't understand how his wards, the officials assigned to carry out these critical missions, were failing so miserably. With unrestrained rage, he threw open his office door and kicked one of them out, roaring, "If you can't even do this, you're useless." That unfortunate ward was the young, bold Jared. His absolute lack of fear, even before royalty, infuriated Horgus further. But Jared didn't respond with trembling submission. Instead, he left quietly, thinking of his own plan, a plan far beyond the king's understanding. Meanwhile, in the neighboring kingdom, Horgus raged and ranted. He ordered a new effort, to forge a diplomatic alliance with the powerful southern kingdom of Maorica. But everyone knew that this move risked war, and if war came, Horgus's forces would lose badly. One of the king's advisors assured him they still had 1,239 soldiers loyal enough to fight to the death. But Horgus knew this was not enough, not to crush Cerevia. Especially now that Jared had risen to power within that kingdom, possessing level 4 magic, a mark of terrifying capability. If I had known this brat would grow into a threat, Horgus muttered, I would have ordered Glass to kill him long ago. But Glass was gone, assassinated by a mercenary from the Master's Guild. The opportunity had passed. Just then, a tall figure entered the great hall. The man Horgus had waited months to see, the mage Akon, had finally returned. And he hadn't come alone. With him were several powerful magicians, all handpicked under Horgus's secret orders and funded at enormous cost. Horgus approached one of the cloaked men and asked, "What class are you?" "Third," the mage replied calmly. That meant one thing. If they attacked Cerevia now, the kingdom could be obliterated in a day. It was what Horgus had waited to hear. War now seemed inevitable. Meanwhile, far to the north, Jared and his retinue traveled through an ancient forest, untouched by most humans. Rumors had spread that Jared intended to establish diplomatic ties with neighboring nations. But when questioned, Jared denied these claims. Our neighbors? He had scoffed. Majorca and Ranella? They argue over coin like rats. His true target wasn't a kingdom at all, but the tribes. Soon, word of Jared's destination began to spread. When it reached one of King Cerevia's wards, the man nearly fell off his horse in shock. He had just seen a tribe of red goblins, aggressive, heavily armed, and anything but welcoming. Even Oben, a well-traveled veteran, was shocked. He had never heard of red goblins in these woods. Their party was soon surrounded. The red goblins formed a tight perimeter, and panic began to spread. The elder knights shouted for the younger ones to protect Jared at all costs. Rakus, the commander of the escort, gave a strict order. Defend if necessary, but do not attack first. Tension rose, until the chieftain of the goblins stepped out. He was not what anyone expected. Calm, poised, and speaking fluent Nara, the goblin introduced himself as Iona, leader of the Red Goblin tribe. He welcomed the guests, intrigued by their presence. Aubrey, Jared's vassal companion, was stunned. A goblin that speaks Nara? But Jared stepped forward with a confident smile. I am Jared of Sarivia. I came to meet you, Iona. I've heard much of your wisdom. Iona, curious, replied, I knew your kingdom by name, but you look different than I imagined. Jared got straight to the point. He wished to establish trade relations, offering resources in exchange for iron and gold. To everyone's surprise, Iona agreed happily. Jared was the first human to ever offer such a deal in peace. But the Goblin King had one condition. I want to know, Iona said, can you accept our estate and our soul? Before Jared could answer, a cart was wheeled in, loaded with nightmare stones, strange, iridescent rocks from the nightmare forest. The Sarivia knights were horrified. These stones? Muttered Rakus. They're worthless. Nightmare stones were beautiful, yes, but common, taken as souvenirs by novice hunters. To use them in a diplomatic exchange seemed like an insult. But Jared didn't flinch. He nodded and presented them formally. To everyone's amazement, Iona lit up with joy. You brought us the nightmare stones. These are sacred to us. The Red Goblins erupted in celebration. They signed the treaty. In a moment, Jared had done what no army could. He united Sarivia with a powerful tribe. And it didn't stop there. Just as the party prepared to leave, another figure emerged. Aonb, Iona's second in command. You can't leave just yet, he said. A treaty means a celebration. More goblins appeared, but this time, they were joined by dark elves. Quiet, sharp-eyed, and powerful, they stepped out from the shadows. Their presence caused unease. Dark elves were known to be reclusive and hostile to outsiders, with them the Ibanina tribe. But Iona explained everything. The goblins, Ibanina and dark elves had signed a joint defense treaty years ago. Jared had just formed an alliance not with one tribe, but three. By nightfall, a grand feast was underway. Goblins and elves danced, drank, and cheered in unison. Jared sat beside Iona, grateful. This knowledge, it saved us. If I hadn't known, we'd be dead. Later, Jared asked Rakus a question. What do the current armies look like? He asked. Rakus sighed. No, sire. We lack resources, so we're focused on improving existing weapons. Good, Jared said. Send all the iron we received from the goblins to the forge. We'll make weapons, swords, arrows, armor. Rakus nodded. Oh, and half the gold. Send it to the kingdom's army. Begin recruitment in Stad Ibina. As they spoke, Iona, who had traveled back with them, overheard the plans. Curious, he asked, are you preparing to go to war? With Majorca? Jared hesitated. Yes, I thought you might object. But Iona waved it off. I support it. Majorca has become a haven for criminals. It's poisoning the continent. Jared exhaled, relieved. To end the evening, Iona raised his mug high and shouted, to our newest glory of Sarivia Jared. Cheers rang out across the kingdom. Allies had been made, armies were being prepared, and in the shadows of the continent, whispers of war had begun to stir. After returning home, the capital was alive with activity. War preparations were in full swing. Among the palace staff and soldiers, a new presence had become both a curiosity and a source of awe. Isabel, Jared's former classmate from Desmond Academy. Though she was now bound by a royal contract and living under a new name, Isabel adapted with startling ease. Within 4 weeks, she had grown accustomed to her body and surroundings. Her confidence, intellect, and sarcasm were as sharp as ever. When questioned about her past, she simply replied, I'm Jared's classmate. He used to be a real mess back at school. The servants didn't dare pry further. Isabel now trained alongside Jared, pushing him to his limits. Every session with her enhanced his magical capabilities. In less than a month, Jared advanced from a second stage mage to stage 3, something that would normally take a year under intense instruction. Isabel herself had already reached stage 2, her specialty being illusion magic, magic that taps into the fears and emotions of others. This branch of magic, notoriously difficult to master, allowed her to conjure enemies from a person's subconscious, forcing them to confront inner demons. Jared has given Isabel a candy and said this was an anniversary present. In his place there's a tradition where a guy was giving a present to a girl. Isabel replied, oh how romantic, are you now warming up to me? Jared said that he has given all single women in this manner. Isabel laughed and said, you're too funny. While laughing. In Jared's office he started to write plans about his nurturing project. The plan was to find talented individuals in the future and recruit them on his side. There are a lot of reasons why Jared invested a lot into this project. Besides the acquisition and recruiting of talents was the reason given by the benefits of PRIST disciplinary system, which was a reward point to the teacher according to the student growth. Isabel showed the highest talent, while Lena followed all the tasks that were given to her, and Mia treated training as a game. But there was one more who sought to join. Hayes. He couldn't call Jared as a teacher and make a hesitant decision since she was a maid and has the lowest progress. Unlike a cleric, a healer is specialized on healing spells. It was a top class that has only 5 people all over the continent. In the living room, Jared says we're in a standstill. In order for Hayes to awaken as a healer, she must be one with the body and the mind. Oberon replied, that will be hard since she walked the path as a maid for 23 years. Jared replied, thinking you're right, she must be pessimistic inside her mind, there must be something holding her back. I need to guide her on the right side. Oberon replied, sir, you have demonstrated your innovative ideas in the toughest situations and we're thankful for that. However, you don't need to do everything on your own. Hayes was giving her best. I'm sure you could trust her a little. The next morning, the palace was in chaos. Jared had been attacked during a routine inspection of the outer training grounds. Hayes, who had been nearby, rushed to the scene. She arrived just in time to see him slump to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. No, no, she screamed, dropping beside him. His eyes were closed, his breathing, shallow, barely there. Hayes shook violently. How did this happen? A guard tried to pull her back, but she shoved him aside and pressed her hands over Jared's chest. Tears streamed down her face. The guard said that we have already called a doctor, but the doctor won't be here in time. No, I am a healer, indeed, to do this. Please bear with me, my lord. A soft glow flickered around her fingers. Then, suddenly, her body jolted as pure white gold energy surged from her palms. Light enveloped Jared's body, knitting torn flesh and purging the wound. 30 minutes later, Hayes cried and reprimanded them, saying, you're terrible, although this was meant to help me, how could you do this? Jared replied, it was only a small cut and we used animal blood to exaggerate a little. Anyway, how does it feel to become a healer? She replied, it was terrible, and you too, even though it was a direct order from the Lord, how could you follow such a plan? Oberon smiled and said, this wasn't what I said when I told you to trust in her. The nurturing project is smooth sailing. While the project to educate the new generation of talent progressed smoothly, far to the north, Rakus was trudging through the snow-covered wilds of the nightmare forest. A blizzard raged around him, howling like a beast. The wind was so fierce it threatened to knock him off his feet with every step. Through the swirling white haze, he spotted a faint light flickering in the distance. Curious and wary, Rakus pushed forward. He hadn't expected to find anyone in this frozen wasteland, yet the light grew closer. At last, he reached a small wooden hut, half buried in snow. Standing in front of it was a bearded old man with sharp eyes and a calm presence. Rakus, the man said, smiling. You've grown. Rakus blinked, then returned the smile. Mr. Olsen, it's been too long. Olsen ushered him inside. The warmth of the fire and a hot cup of tea thawed the ice from Rakus' fingers. You've changed, Olsen said, tossing another log onto the hearth. When the fire was blazing strong, Rakus reached into his bag and pulled out a small glass bottle filled with a glowing red liquid. Ronela's medicine, he said. A gift, from Lord Jared. Olsen raised his brows. So it's real. I've heard the stories. The medicine, whispered about across the continent, was a miracle for those trapped in the nightmare forest for long periods. Rumors had spread like wildfire, praising the concoction for its effectiveness. Olsen had doubted the tale. How did a fool of a lord manage to create something this brilliant? He asked. Rakus looked up. He's not the same man he used to be. Olsen's eyes narrowed. He abandoned me once, and now he wants me back? I know, Rakus said quietly. But he's changed. That's why I came. The kingdom needs you, now more than ever. Outside, the storm continued to howl, a reflection of the chaos brewing across the continent. The mainland of Nars was unraveling. Wars broke out like brush fires. Kings seized land, rulers fell, bloodlines, oaths, even divine favor could no longer guarantee survival. Heads rolled regardless of heritage. In this age, death rode a warhorse, fast and merciless, heading north. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom of Krivia, Jared sat in a tavern near the sea, nursing a mug of cold beer. The seafood here was cheap and fresh, a perk of the coastal setting. The frosty weather didn't bother him much, but Isabel wasn't a fan. It's too cold, she muttered. Nothing grows here. Jared chuckled. That's why I brought pesticides. We'll see if they work. Hazes, sitting nearby, smiled. They'll work. You made them yourself. She was right, and she also pointed out that everything in the region had been cleaned up, the roads, the buildings, even the docks gleamed. That was thanks to Arknes, who had promised to lead by example and keep everything spotless. The people believed in Jared. Some even said he alone had lifted Krivia from its knees. With medicine for Ranella's disease now widely available, and the kingdom offering full support to victims, the future was looking brighter. So much so that Jared was now being urged to expand Siravia's territory, to relocate the Hunters Guild headquarters here. A big decision, but perhaps a wise one. As Jared pondered the future, a loud voice broke his thoughts. "This beer is amazing." "Another round," shouted an older woman, raising her mug high. Jared's eyes widened when he saw her, Ella, the infamous sword warrior from the game Paradise. She was a mercenary, a brilliant fighter who helped the protagonist with nearly every major challenge, but always for a price. She was loud, brash, and powerful, and she was supposed to appear years later, not now, and certainly not here in the north. Sitting next to her was another woman, silent, composed. Chloe. She was known in the game as the Queen of Silence, and would one day become the Queen of the Dark Elves. A central figure in the final arc of Paradise, whose story was hidden by the developers to preserve the game's biggest twist. Jared stared. This isn't a coincidence. He stood up, heart-pounding, and crossed the tavern. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He walked up behind him, preparing to speak. But before he could say more than 2 words, Ella waved him off with a sneer. "Sorry, kid, I'm not into younger guys." Jared froze. That fast? She hadn't even given him a chance. As he turned, deflated, his foot slipped and he landed hard on the wooden floor. In a flash, Hazes rushed to his side, placing a hand gently under his head. "Could you be a little more respectful?" she snapped. "You're talking to a high-ranking noble of the Krivia kingdom." The room went silent, heads turned, whispers spread. "Lord Jared? Here?" Ella raised a brow. Even she was taken aback, but not for long. "You're not an ordinary maid," she said coldly to Hazes. "I'm a viscount as well. Do you think there's only one noble around the world?" Jared stood, dusting off his coat, and gently wrapped an arm around Hazes' shoulders, shielding her. "Could I bother you for something?" he said. "I'll pay you handsomely." Ella replied, "Well, this was an unexpected situation. I apologize for thinking you're a sleazebag making a move against me. Let's talk, but not in these place. So, 500 gold and a mansion and all we just did was to teach some kid?" Ella asked. Jared replied, "Yup, that the only down payment. Of course we need to write down and notarize the entire deal." Chloe said to Ella, "Teacher, I'll choose to follow you whatever you choose. After all, the human world doesn't differ from one place to another." Ella asked Jared, "Why do you trust me? It wasn't long since my pupil Chloe became my pupil. This was my first time traveling in the north. You don't know who we are?" Jared replied, "Of course I couldn't trust you yet, but money is the only thing that I could entice you to stay. He thinks as long as I pay they will help me, and aside from her personality she could never find a place called home." Later that night, long after the tavern had emptied, Jared sat in his quarters, still awake. Despite the late hour, he felt no fatigue, thanks to Gora's pendant, which suppressed exhaustion. His mind buzzed with thoughts, of Rakis, Olsen, Ranella's medicine, Ella, Chloe, and everything yet to come. There was so much to remember. So much to record. He glanced at his journal, where he had started noting every important discovery, some of it even written in Korean, just in case someone tried to read it without permission. This was no longer just a game. This was a world of secrets, of shifting allegiances, and of destiny creeping ever closer. The next morning, Lena and Chloe trained together beneath the early sunlight. For Lena, it was grueling at first. Her muscles ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, and the frostbitten air cut through her lungs like glass. But she pressed on. She remembered the promise she made, to the bark, and more importantly, to herself. She would grow stronger, no matter the cost. It was a hellish workout, and Jared, watching from a distance, couldn't help but hope she didn't become an overly muscular, bloodthirsty monster if she kept improving at this rate. Chloe trained just as hard, but she moved with quiet precision and ease. She barely seemed tired at all. "Don't act so surprised," Ella scoffed from the sidelines. "The world's way too big for Lena to be the only talented brat in it. There are plenty more, some even stronger." She crossed her arms and glanced at Lena, who looked exhausted nearby. "Still, she's fast," Ella admitted, watching Lena dodge a magical projectile with near-perfect timing. That's something. Apparently, whoever had trained Lena before hadn't been very good. Ella believed she could have killed most people in 5 seconds if she really wanted to, but she would give Lena at least 5 seconds of respect. Thanks to Jared's magical tools, 4 homing elemental spells hovered in the air, ready to strike. These enchanted orbs were perfect for training defensive techniques, especially shield usage. When asked how he'd come up with such a clever training system, Jared answered awkwardly, "It's a special method from the Eastern continent, tied to a certain system." The truth was more technical than magical. Using the same method repeatedly would cause diminishing returns due to the anti-macro learning safeguard in the world's hidden mechanics. But rotating through 4 different elemental spells, fire, ice, lightning, and wind, tricked the system into treating them separately. A loophole. Ella, however, had figured out Lena's condition without even using a spiritual eye. Jared was quietly impressed, but given Lena's pace, he wasn't worried. She was catching up quickly. Meanwhile, far from the training fields, Mr. Oberon returned to the kingdom after weeks away. The farmers and knights welcomed him back with open arms. The old steward had come to inspect the crop fields, and to his satisfaction, everything was thriving. Since the magical pesticides had wiped out the migrating pests, the farmland was thriving like never before. Interestingly, the pests had begun moving toward the neighboring kingdom of Ranella, and now their envious neighbors were desperate to learn Krivia's secret. The farmers expressed deep gratitude to Mr. Aubin and to their lord, Jared. To work in such fertile lands was a blessing, and when Aubin thanked each of them in return, many were moved to tears. These weren't just subjects, they were people who saw Jared not just as a king, but as their leader, their protector. With that moment of heartfelt recognition, Jared received a system notification. Achievement unlocked, sincere recognition. Plus 200 loyalty points. Bonus activated. Golden Age. Production-related abilities increased by 100% for 30 days. It was a turning point for Krivia. Fields bloomed, smithies roared, and towns bustled. Everywhere Jared looked, he saw progress, and he knew it was because of his leadership. For once, he allowed himself a proud, unguarded smile. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Jealous voices whispered beyond the borders, and shadows began to stir. That afternoon, a man arrived from the kingdom of Majorca, bowing deeply before Jared. "I bring a message from Lord Horgus of Majorca," he said. His name was Akron, and Jared greeted him warmly, inviting him into the palace to discuss matters of diplomacy. Their 2 kingdoms had never been particularly friendly, but Akron seemed to suggest otherwise. He praised Jared's decision to maintain contact and claimed Lord Horgus was very pleased. Jared forced a polite smile, though his mind raced with caution. Akron's tone felt patronizing, as if Majorca saw itself as superior. Rakus, standing silently beside Jared, caught on instantly. His stern expression and clenched jaw made it clear he wasn't happy with this guest. Eventually, Jared asked to see the letter Akron had brought. The envoy handed over an envelope, sealed with Horgus's crest. Jared opened it and read silently. "Dear King Jared, after reflecting on our past, I realize I have underestimated you and your people. I wish for peace and harmony between our lands. Let us begin a new chapter, one of mutual respect and shared prosperity." Jared set the letter down, his hands trembling slightly, not from emotion, but from the rage boiling beneath his calm exterior. In truth, he longed for peace more than anyone. But he also recognized the arrogance woven between the lines. Still, he smiled. "I'll send a collection of our kingdom's finest crystals as a sign of goodwill," he said warmly. Akron bowed, clearly satisfied. He had fulfilled his mission. That evening, Jared retreated into the woods with a bow and arrows, seeking peace in the quiet of the hunt. The sunset cast long shadows across the land, and he spotted a deer between the trees. One shot, clean and fast. A nearby warrior cheered. His Majesty is an expert marksman. Rakus joined him a few minutes later. "Why are we being so submissive to these bastards?" he asked quietly. "Didn't we agree to distance ourselves from Majorca's influence?" Jared didn't respond right away. He stared at the setting sun before speaking. "Sometimes, we smile before we strike," he said. "Let them lower their guard. The last blow is always the best, when they least expect it." Rakus nodded slowly. He understood, and now, he played along with the king's charade. A banquet was announced that night, celebrating Krivia's booming development. Food, drink, and laughter filled the halls. But Jared, even as he smiled, could feel the storm coming. He saw through Akron's polite mask. His spiritual eye revealed everything. The envoy was a spy, well-trained and deeply embedded. He would report everything back to Horgus. And once that happened, Majorca's army would march. Jared was ready. As the celebration wound down, Jared stepped outside, clutching his stomach. The alcohol churned inside him. Rachis rushed over, blaming himself for not training better care of the king. 1 month later, April 29, 1414 early morning. War drums sounded. The kingdom of Majorca raised its full army and began its march toward Krivia. Their soldiers were brimming with confidence, hunger in their eyes, and bloodlust in their hearts. They were ready to burn this once forgotten kingdom to the ground. They didn't know they were walking into the jaws of a trap. They didn't know who they had just declared war on. The entire castle was suspiciously quiet today. Lena noticed the silence and asked Chloe if she had seen where everyone had gone. Chloe didn't know, and didn't really care. Suddenly, Lena felt a chill behind her as her mentor, Ella, appeared without warning. "I didn't give you permission to speak during training," Ella said sharply. Without further explanation, she gave Lena a punishment, 20 laps around the training ground. Lena immediately set off to complete her task, heart pounding. Ella already knew about Jared's intentions. What she couldn't understand was why he hadn't told her earlier about his plans to start a war. His silence baffled her. He wasn't thinking clearly if he thought he could keep something like this hidden. She couldn't just sit idly by while things escalated. Even if Jared didn't want her involved, she couldn't look the other way. Suddenly, something shot through the air, unexpected and fast, striking the warrior who had been stationed to watch the borders. The soldiers of Sarivia, caught off guard, made the decision to fall back. They needed to regroup and alert others. The enemy had destroyed one of Majorca's watchtowers, and it became clear that Sarivia had to redeploy its guards immediately, possibly even send in a special unit. But their lord disagreed. He thought it wasn't worth wasting time and manpower on such trifles. After all, he believed Jared only had a single battalion. If he'd known it would be this easy, he would have taken the territory long ago. The enemy soldiers stumbled upon a massive stockpile of alcohol hidden in the storerooms, enough to supply hundreds. The news lifted their spirits. To their leader, Jared seemed more and more worthless with every step forward. The soldiers of Majorca raised their swords high, rallying morale. This land, they believed, was rightfully theirs. Villagers, hearing the rising cries of soldiers, poured out of their homes. Yesterday everything had been fine. Today, war was at their doorstep. Jared was informed that the enemy had already broken through the fourth line of defense. Given their speed, they would arrive soon. Though Jared had made preparations, he hadn't expected such a fast advance. He had to accelerate the plan. He turned to Rachis, his most trusted man, someone he could count on in any situation. Holding the current position was critical. There would be no place to retreat if it fell. Rachis set off immediately to carry out Jared's orders. Just then, Hayes came running to Jared, out of breath and desperate. "Why didn't you take me with you?" she cried. "I can help. I can heal people." But Jared shook his head. The battlefield was no place for her. Hayes's healing abilities were rare, perhaps even indispensable, but the front lines were too dangerous. One mistake, and she could be lost forever. And Jared couldn't bear that risk. Tears welled in Hayes's eyes. She wanted to serve her kingdom. She wanted to help him. But Jared had known her since childhood, since the day she arrived at the palace. She meant more to him than she could imagine. As he held her hand, a memory flashed in her mind. Jared helping her up for the first time, their eyes meeting in mutual trust. She needed to trust him now. As they stood there, Isabel appeared behind Hayes and gently pulled her back. "You'll do more good helping the wounded," Isabel said. "And I'll make sure you're kept safe." Reluctantly, Hayes nodded, and the two parted ways. Everything was in motion now. Positions secured, orders given. The time had come to make the enemy pay. The soldiers had found an ideal defensive position, but their numbers were low, only 300 men. Many were talented, but still far too few to face the overwhelming force before them. 100 of them were mere farmers, unequipped and untrained. Rachis stood at the head of the army, his mind heavy with doubts. They were asking civilians to risk their lives simply because they lacked soldiers. Yet, when the call to arms was made, these people had responded willingly. Jared had only wanted peace with Majorca. He had even offered a truce. But despite all efforts, the enemy continued its advance. Now, 1,200 trained soldiers from Majorca, fully equipped, were heading toward them. Those too afraid to fight were not judged. Rachis remembered a time when people told him to abandon Sarivia. when Jared was seen as a fool, unworthy of the crown. He had been cast out, jobless and cold. Yet even then, he refused to leave. His loyalty never wavered. Some had said the kingdom would not survive the coming winter, that its people would freeze and die. But those words didn't sway him. If the kingdom fell to the frost, he would fall with it. Now, as he returned to the present, he heard angry voices. People were rising. No one had the right to speak ill of Sarivia. It was their land, built by their hands and defended with their hearts. These people were ready to fight, even with their bare fists. Rakes was moved. Their courage ignited a fire in him. He ordered that armor and weapons be distributed to every willing fighter. Suddenly, a soldier burst through the barricades. "The enemy is approaching," he shouted breathlessly. Rakes scanned the horizon. In the distance, dark shapes moved. What they had been preparing for had finally arrived. But something was wrong. It wasn't Majorca's forces. It was Lord Ranella's troops, storming toward the kingdom with deadly intent. Two enemy armies now loomed on the horizon, Majorca and Ranella, united by a common purpose, to burn Sarivia to the ground. And leading them, Lord Ranella himself, riding ahead of his soldiers with a wild grin. "I can already see the borders of the kingdom," he shouted. The goal was close. Just a month ago, the kingdoms had argued bitterly about war, each blaming the other. But beneath the surface, they shared the same goal, peace, and perhaps, mutual benefit. At least, that was what they told their people. Now, Lord Ranella and Horgus sat across from each other at a long wooden table. The mood was tense, the air thick with silent calculations. Ranella wasn't entirely indifferent to the state of things, but his resentment toward Sarivia was not deeply rooted either. It was political, not personal. Horgus leaned forward. "Is it true," he asked directly, "that the ruler of Ranella recently received tribute from Sarivia?" Ranella nodded. "Yes, they sent us provisions. A large amount, grain, gold, supplies. An attempt to maintain friendly relations." This answer only irritated Horgus further. It was a clever, calculated move from Jared, too clever. Horgus tried to persuade Ranella to think more critically. It was strange that Jared, who had been silent for so long, was now suddenly playing nice. It didn't sit right. "The number of their hunters is decreasing," Horgus noted. "And it keeps dropping." He was convinced Jared was acting out of fear. Saravia's borders were expanding, but they were still not prepared for open conflict. That's why Jared was trying to buy peace, stalling for time. Horgus had studied Sarivia inside and out. He knew they had barely 300 soldiers. Ranella raised his eyebrows in surprise at that number, but it only strengthened their theory. Jared was hoping gold would keep the wolves at bay. They both agreed. If Sarivia was desperate enough to offer tribute, they might offer even more if pressed. So, instead of attacking immediately, they decided to wait. They would pretend to accept the peace and gather their strength. When the time was right, they would crush Sarivia together. To formalize this plan, Horgus sent Akon, a scouting mage, under the pretense of goodwill. It was a trap within a trap. When the kingdoms publicly declared themselves allies, Ranella nearly spilled his wine. But it was already set in motion. 1 month of preparation, then a surprise assault. The alliance was formed. Though their kingdoms had nothing in common, they had one shared enemy, Jared. First, they would eliminate him. Then, they would turn on each other if needed. Ranella laughed bitterly. "Jared won't even see it coming. By the time he learns what we've done, it will be far too late." Saravia's rash decisions, Ranella said, would shorten Jared's life by many years. No matter how hard he fought, he couldn't stop this. As they spoke, Horgus's army had already surrounded most of Sarivia, exploiting a weakness in Jared's defenses. Foolishly, Jared had placed all his manpower at the front, leaving the bypass routes lightly guarded. Ranella stood and shouted, "Ignorance is a sin. Let Jared say goodbye to his land. Soon, it will pass into our bloodstained hands." Ranella then added, "If they come begging for mercy, I might be kind enough not to destroy them completely." But just then, the boy who had been standing at the front, dressed like Jared, his posture identical, removed his helmet slowly. It wasn't Jared. The enemy spy watching from nearby paled. He had been fooled. This wasn't their target at all. It was a trap. Realizing he had to report back immediately, the spy turned to run, only to be intercepted by Saravia's soldiers. He never made it back. The soldier who caught him muttered, "If a man responsible for public order and healthcare is this shaken, what are we supposed to feel?" Another soldier pointed at the spy. "He's the one who helped Ranella's army enter our lands. He's the one who gave them a way in. The knight beside him clenched his fists. Wow, there is really a spy. And there's only one way to pay for that. The spy's eyes widened. They knew. They had known all along. The spy's end came swiftly. A few days earlier, Jared and Rakis had discussed this very scenario, how and where the enemies might strike. Jared was confident they would take the main road where their front line was most visible. But Rakis had other ideas. I believe, Rakis had said, they'll try a bypass route. It's the smarter move, easier to ambush us. Jared agreed. The hill terrain around Sarivia gave them an advantage, one Ranella and Horgus were surely aware of. Horgus had, in fact, discovered that bypass, and it became his plan. Jared had predicted this, and because their spy posed as a lumberjack, he would already know the terrain perfectly. So Jared laid a trap there. Now, standing beside Rakis, Jared held a magical landmine in his hands, a device he had designed himself. It triggered an explosion through magical overload, powerful enough to rival a fourth-class mage's spell. Rakis watched in awe. He had never seen such a device. Jared said, "Stand behind me and I'll pull it." Jared pulled the cord. A magical signal surged forward toward a stump on the bypass road. The device embedded there began to glow, then exploded. The ground shook. The explosion tore apart the landscape, leaving a massive crater and sending magical debris flying in all directions. Jared instantly cast a protective barrier to shield them both. Rakis was stunned. The sheer destructive force was unlike anything he'd seen. And Jared? He simply said, "Now let's see how many soldiers they're willing to send through that road." The enemy armies of Majorca had chosen this path, the wrong path. And it would be their last. They were marching straight into a death trap, and none would leave it alive. At the front rode Horgus, proud and eager. From atop his horse, he bellowed, "Slay all who resist. Burn down everything in our way. Chain those who surrender." His voice rose above the noise of marching boots and clanking armor. "Today marks the beginning of our massacre." The soldiers cheered, thrusting their weapons skyward, and not far from him, hidden in the brush, Jared watched silently. The strings were already in his hands. Akron tells the mages to start the defensive spell. With calm precision, Jared pulled the ropes that sent magical signals to the mines. They had been planted one after the other beneath the road, meticulously placed, impossible to detect. And now, they would erupt in a synchronized explosion that would leave nothing standing. Horgus saw his horses hesitate, then panic. Too late. The earth trembled. The mines detonated. The first wave of soldiers was engulfed in flames and shards of magical energy. The screams came quickly, terribly. Men burned alive, torn apart. Horses shrieked and reared, chaos spreading in all directions. The three mages raced to the center of the road, casting a powerful magical barrier to protect the survivors. But it was too late for most. Half the army had already perished. Farther away, Ranella heard the explosion from his position and spun around, stunned. So this was Jared's plan all along. Ranell now realized with horror that they were the ones at a disadvantage, not Sarivia. Despite its small army of 300 men, Sarivia held the high ground, the traps, and the strategy. Even without Majorca's support, Ranell still commanded 800 soldiers. He wasn't going to stop. He roared, "Turn all who resist into dust. Submit or perish." From the defense lines, Rakis raised his shields. The soldiers followed, preparing to strike back with whatever strength they had. Back on the ravaged road, Akron staggered, disoriented. Removing his shield, he looked around and found Horgus. "Are you all right?" The Lord was alive, barely touched, but shaken. "Report," he barked. The news was devastating. All were dead, except for the 500 troops who hadn't yet reached the explosion zone. The rest, gone. Horgus stared at the burning flag of his kingdom, lying torn and scorched in the dirt. His lips trembled. "And the mages?" he asked. Akron's voice was grim. "Isaac and Odium are gone." It was a catastrophic loss. The men Horgus had counted on to lead the invasion were all dead. The great war he envisioned was now a smoldering ruin. How could someone like Jared, so young, so underestimated, possess such terrible weapons? How had he destroyed so many lives in one blow? Now Horgus had only Akron. He turned to him with wide, desperate eyes. "You must not leave my side, ever again." But before the Lord could think of a new plan, disaster struck again. From the shadows, Jared appeared, a blur of rage and vengeance, and rushed toward Akron, who was standing behind Horgus. Akron barely had time to shout, "My lord," before Jared's hands closed around his throat. The boy lifted the man clean off the ground, choking him with terrifying strength. Akron understood then, it had all been a ruse. Jared's calm, his absence from the battlefield, the puppet soldiers, it was all staged to mislead them. But now that realization came far too late. Jared soared into the sky, still holding Aaron by the neck. Higher and higher he flew. The wind howled around them. And then, he let go. Akron plummeted, arms flailing. In that split second, Jared cast ice magic, hurling a deadly storm after him. Akron had to choose. Activate flight magic to survive the fall, or cast a shield to survive the spell. Either way, he would die. Akron made his choice. He shielded himself from the ice storm. A shimmering barrier formed around him mid-fall. It absorbed the worst of the blast, but Jared wasn't finished. This fight wasn't like a duel between mages. There was no honor, no rules, no pause between attacks. Jared had no intention of sparring. He was here to end it. Jared dived down after Akron, grabbed him again in midair, and dragged him toward the ground. While holding him tightly, he formed a new magic circle in the air. Only now did Akron realize, Jared intended to use his body as part of the next spell. The two of them fell together, faster and faster. Akron could feel the distance to the ground vanishing beneath them. Akron figured out Jared's intention.